Welcome back, everyone, to me building the first world of Demon Souls, World 1 1, aka the Gates of Boletaria. Today, we're finishing up the large wall of the Gates of Boletaria, doing a little terraforming. I'm going to start working as well on the World Tendency area. Now, my plan for this had been kind of to follow the path of progression if you're playing the main game. However, I wanted to finish the wall, and in order to do that, I had to finish this tower. And so we're doing this tower first, which is actually like almost the last place that you will visit in your first playthrough, because essentially you unlock the main gate to go fight the first boss, and then you come down this tower to get back to the first boss. But yeah, we're finishing it now, so that way I can finish up this whole wall. You can see I'm spending a lot of time trying to get just the levels, angles of these stairs right, just right, the lengths right. The good news is, once I get this figured out, the other tower is almost identical. It's just the top level that's different. So I'll actually just end up cheating a little bit and flipping this over, copying and reversing this over to the other side, mirroring it. You can see it took me a long time to get the thickness of the stairs right, the walls, the layers. It was a little bit trickier than I anticipated, but I do get it in the end. Pretty happy with how it feels, and you're not going to really get a good vibe of it from this little build, this playback of the build, but when you're actually walking in this area, it does feel very much spot on for in the game. Finally, after a lot of trial and error, I get it set correctly, and then we're starting to texture everything in this area. You can see here, this is something I think is really cool about just the design of this area, is that the first 2/3, roughly, of the tower have stone walkways, stone stairs leading up. But then you get to this point in the tower, and it's all wooden walkways, scaffolding, and stairs, and I think that's really cool. It's also a lot of fun to build that kind of stuff. Conquest has a lot of really cool blocks for doing all the beams and cross beams and supports and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of really cool options for making this look really good, and it feels, in my opinion, a lot like the original game. Final thing I do is I start placing some lighting around. It's something I completely forgot during the build, but it is there. And I start working on the supports for the actual full-on roof. This is the only floor that's full-on wood. Interesting thing about this room, on this tower, this room is the same shape and size as on the other tower. However, on this one, they have an extra wall that kind of blocks it off into like almost a full third of it blocked off. There's nothing behind it at all. If you're in the world viewer that I have, you can just go right through the walls, and it's just an empty room. Not sure why they did it that way, but it definitely makes it a little bit easier for decor. And at this point, just finishing up the tower so I can start building the wall. This wall design is a little bit more simple now than it will eventually end up being. And that's because in the game, you never really get close to this wall, so there's less detail on it than on the mirrored side. So you'll see I design it for now, and then when I realize on the other side that it's a little bit more highly detailed, I'll come back and update this eventually. I think it's actually a little bit off camera, but you'll recognize it because it is supposed to just be a mirrored wall. And then the wall goes to this tower. Initially, I made the tower a little bit smaller than the other two main towers, but I realized that while it's shorter, it's actually the same width, so I will come back shortly and adjust it. I realize it's too small, actually. This is where I realized that the tower wasn't the right size when I tried to meet up the back of the wall. Now you'll see I start texturing, well, the buttresses I texture a slightly darker tone than everything else, but I'll start texturing the wall again by hand like I did everywhere else. That being said, I've found out a way to kind of do the same thing with Axiom. I think I might still end up hand texturing some of the more prominent walls just so that I can get it just right. But you'll see later on, for some of the smaller walls that are not quite as visible, I definitely will be using Axiom to make life a lot faster for me. I was thinking to myself around this point how funny it is I'm spending so much time building this section that in the game at least is like just so far off in the distance you never get to see. But it does make a big difference. You'll see in the final cinematic just like the atmosphere this adds when you're looking from the bridge. It really does. It is worth the effort for sure. Also, I don't think I mentioned this in the first video, but when I'm doing this texturing, I am actually basing it off of how the walls in-game look visually, like where it's darker and lighter and all that stuff, trying to make it as accurate as possible. But here you see I'm building the final piece of bridge or wall and the final tower on this side, and they are at a roughly 22-degree angle. Luckily, this design's fairly straightforward, so it's not too much of a hassle. You can see I copied and pasted the wall over, so I didn't have to make it all, but then I had to adjust the little back sides of the buttresses or supports or whatever you want to call them. Now I started placing the angled buttresses. It's funny because up close they look kind of wonky because of how that angle works, but from a distance I think it serves the purpose just fine. And again, unless someone's just in this map flying around, you're not going to really ever see it because it's so far away from the intended path in the game of Demon Souls. It's always interesting to build a normal shape on this kind of an angle. And here I start doing the gradient texturing on this wall. I'm a little bit sad with myself. I got lazy on the final tower, and I just do a pure randomized kind of splatter style texturing job. Again, when you're on the bridge, you can't tell. It's just the general color scheme. So it's fine from a long distance, but I really think I might come back and change it later, just because when you are right in front of it, it's so obvious. You'll see in just a second how random it looks compared to everything else, where it feels, like a actual weathered, textured wall. Yeah, see, it definitely stands out. If there were some other details on it, it might hide it a little bit, but for sure, it's definitely very obvious compared to the rest of the walls and towers. But either way, here we are. We're starting to use Axiom to do the terrain work. So this whole right-hand side of the terrain is completed after this section here, after I build the mountains and the lower section. You can see as well, I've definitely started to kind of get a better feel for Axiom at this point compared to in the first video. It's coming by much more quickly. I also learned you can, in fact, add masks to the tools you're doing, so I can smooth only the gray wool, only the green wool, and also when I start doing the gradienting a little bit later, I don't have to worry about moving the mountain back so I don't miss or accidentally color other things that don't need to be colored. So, pretty happy with learning more about Axiom. It's coming more quickly, more naturally. I guess now all I gotta do is start to learn how to build with it, but we'll get there. It's baby steps. And then I also use Axiom. Well, I paint the walls first, or the mountains, cliff sides. But then I also use Axiom to, once I get done painting all of this, I use it to fill up the river. Whoops, you can see I moved too far away from this spot. I start filling it with water. It's such a nice feature too. You'll see a little bit later, I did fill beyond this space, but that's okay. It's not the end of the world. It'll all be hidden under the city later on, so not a big deal. Yeah, see right there, the water expanded past, but that's okay. Now we're getting back to building this side. I'm finishing up the area that is the world tendency area. Again, this is locked behind either having pure white or pure black world tendency. This is essentially like a little execution ground. Executioner Meralda resides inside this little tower, and there's a whole bunch of like various execution things in this little plot here. You'll see I do a little bit of building here, and then I'll go back and build some more of the wall because I need some of the reference of where things should line up before I finish this area. But one thing I do really like is there's more of this woodwork, lots of rickety wooden little platforms and all these like, supports and cross beams and all that stuff. I really enjoy building that kind of stuff. Now, I'll spoil it a little bit. I forget to finish the interior of this little building. We'll have to come back to that next video. But I do get this area completed otherwise. I'm really happy with how it turns out. Now here's where I mirror over the wall. It's almost identical. You'll see a little bit later on. I don't think I end up showing it on camera. I realized off camera, but you got all these little arrow slits on the top of the wall. But there's only 2 of them on that far left segment, but there should be 3. The wall is correct on the right. You can see me adding these details I told you I didn't realize were over there. The wall is correct on the right, but on the left it is ever so slightly longer. So it's not exactly mirrored. But I do end up fixing that for later on. But here we are, we're going back to this little executioner's area. This is just a couple of wooden platforms. Not sure what purpose they're supposed to have, but I believe the crossbeam would be maybe where you hang bodies. Not sure. In game, there's nothing there. It's just these wooden structures. And then I realize I have to extend the little plateau for a second little executioner area. But that's okay, because in game it is actually overhanging quite a bit. And so when I go do the terrain work later on, I don't have to bring it all the way down because it does overhang. It kind of juts out quite a bit from the base. So that's not too bad. Now this area, I probably could have done Axiom to make it a little bit easier, I think, but I really feel like getting the land sculpted properly is better done by hand. Axiom can only do so much. It looks not quite as natural as it can do when you do it by hand and take the time to really get it clean looking. Now here I'm continuing on the actual path of progression. And again, it's so I can get the right reference point for continuing on down in the world tendency area. So this little building I'm working on now is actually the first real area you go inside of once you start traversing the level. But by having that little support beam done, I now have the reference point I needed, and so I'll be kind of jumping back and forth a lot to the world tendency area. Also, you see I'm making a lot of adjustments as I'm realizing things are not quite right. Nothing as major as last time, though, where I have to keep resizing and moving the towers and stuff on the gatehouse. I started off with this little top tower as being an odd number of blocks. I prefer building with an odd number of blocks for buildings. But I realized this window needed to be exactly like the other windows on the other towers, so it had to be an even block to make it look centered. But that's okay. I think it's ever so slightly wider than I would prefer, but it's fine. I end up making it work because the stairs that come out of this building actually butt up right up against that other buttress or support beam on the wall, but there's slightly less space than should be, but it ends up being okay. But now that I've got that building built, I finally know where the final platform I'm going to build is for the executioner's area. And this one is firmly an executioner's thing with a couple of guillotines built onto it. So there's no question as to what this platform is for, unlike the others. Then with that built, I can start working on the hill to actually get up to the segment that Meralda chills in. I may go back out and smooth down that slope a little bit more. But I'm pretty happy with the general shape of the slope. There's just one little segment that's rougher than I would prefer. You probably spotted it already. But now that we're done with the slope, I can build the very final bit of scenery that's in this area, which is another just random platform. It's got a lot of random supports. I'm not really sure what the purpose of this is. Maybe it was supposed to be something at one point. It's been partially destroyed. Or maybe they were building something and didn't finish. Not really sure. It's not obvious at all, but it is now complete. And then you can see me start using the gradient tool, or I think I used just the white noise tool to paint the ground here with Axiom. Bit of a random awkward pause here. I couldn't figure out what my character was doing in this time period, but I'm back now. And then started painting everything. Some of it you still have to do by hand. Layers can be a little bit weird, so. And then now I remove that top section just for the video purposes. I start working on the interior here. This is a cool room that's split into two. That random jut out in the wall. I'm not really sure why they would design it that way, but they did. And this is a cool room because it's the first time you go indoors, well, beyond the tutorial area anyways. And it also showcases something that you gotta kind of start thinking about, which is there are enemies around the corner, so when you walk in the room, you don't know they're there, and they'll probably jump out and get you your first time. And it's around both of those corners, in fact. So it's kind of teaching you to use your camera, because it's a third-person game. Use your camera to look around corners, have your shield ready if you're not sure what to do. Kind of helps teach you the basics. They're all weak enemies, so it's not like they're gonna like do too much harm to you, but it's a good teaching tool. FromSoft's really good about kind of teaching you how to play these games. Now at this point I start building the very last section that I decide to do along the wall before just going to terrain and finishing it up. This is where you pop out and continue on your progression. You come outside that building and you'll briefly be outside. It's actually the first place you'll encounter human enemies outside of the tutorial anyways. They've all been dredgelings up to this point, which are kind of like Demon Souls equivalent to hollows from the Dark Souls games. But then once that's done, I'll finish texturing, and then I just go to do a bunch of terrain work from here. Oh, nope, I take it back. I did a little bit of more decorating on the wall. But then, yeah, I finished texturing, and then it's just all terrain work from here. We're in the home stretch. So, I have a few things I wanted to say before we move to the cinematic. Number one, the next video, I mentioned it briefly, I'm going to continue along the path of progression. We're going to go inside the wall, up to the top of the wall, and then my goal is to finish the interior of that left-hand tower, as well as build the mausoleum that houses old King Doran, which is in this far, far left tower here. You go out into another walkway into a mausoleum area. And once I complete that, I will then be able to finish all of the terrain in this little valley here and really fully complete this area. I'm really excited about that. I'm also going to be doing some detail work, a lot of planting of grass, bushes, build some trees, put some rocks around. I have to finish decorating the area too that has progression. You know, the bridge is completely decorated, but that wall up there has lots of, you know, barrels and other little odds and ends that need to be placed down. I'm not sure what I'll do, if I'll continue more beyond that for the next update. It depends on how long that takes. It may not take long, in which case after that you start moving inwards into the actual fortress itself, which is really exciting. Well, thanks for coming in and stopping by and checking this out. I hope you all enjoyed. Please consider liking and subscribing. Maybe send a post a comment. Otherwise I will see y'all next time.